Look at these scenes. Well, it's certainly a change from the concrete jungles many of us in Asia work in. This is the beauty of Mongolia, all that unspoiled grassland and nomadic living in yurts, goat herding. But under the pastoral idyll lies a lot of very rich natural resources, which is really a key to Mongolia's attraction to a lot of foreign investment. In fact, Dr. Mark Mobius, our very good friend on the program, I should say, from Templeton, liked it so much he devoted an entire chapter very recently amidst his most recent travels in Asia on his blog, and wrote, "There are many reasons for us to return to the land of Genghis Khan, one of which, of course, is compelling investment opportunities over the next year and even beyond that." On the same blog, though, he also laments issues that struck him as an environment which felt very post-USSR, post-Soviet. Infrastructure needs a lot of work, obviously, and in fact, he also gets the sense, he says, that the Mongolian government seems to be grappling with a certain post-Soviet nostalgia combined with a fear that they could be ripped off by foreigners. So, got to be careful when balancing this whole delicate situation. Our guest joining Brad, Zip, and myself is Ганзориг Alzabayar, president of the Mongolian Financial Markets Association, also the CEO of Prime Insurance, the biggest property insurance company in Mongolia, and he happens to be in Hong Kong. Ганзориг, nice to see you on the show.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. People recognize that there's a lot of opportunity in Mongolia, but somebody like Mark Mobius, who loves, to kind of spend time on the ground and get to know the real people and just see what's going on beyond the PowerPoint presentations, says that there are a lot of little issues that, it feels like, almost like Siberia, like post-Soviet era in some way. So how ripe is Mongolia?
Well, I've seen the blog myself.
Oh, you have
too.
seen the blog. Okay, well, you know what I'm talking about then.
Yeah, so basically there is what we call a little bit much democracy. I mean, the reason why we are a little bit lagging Kazakhstan, for example, is because we are the true democratic state in this certain region, and there are 76 people in the parliament trying to decide to reach consensus on every different interests. So that's why it's taking a little bit more time, and that's why some people are referring there are some little issues. But I think in the longer run, it's the true frontier, new frontier of investment.
Okay, so well, of course, the consensus of democracy can mean it takes a little more time to come to decisions, but you're involving more people rather than somebody just handing down orders from the top. We'll leave the political discussion to later. But when one thinks of Mongolia, it tends to be mining. Hundreds of millions of investment, which has either been committed or in the years to come will be committed to going into the mining space. But surely Mongolia is more than just the stuff in the ground, correct?
Correct, definitely. When you see the recent trend, for example, Louis Vuitton just opened their 65th store, and Zegna and Hugo Boss following, and there is a potential retail sector, although the number of people, the population is only 2.7, 2.8 million. And also there is a growing sector for infrastructure. For infrastructures means transportation, the road build, we need to build lots of roads, and there is also growing sector for manufacturing and also different types of food processing. I'm talking about meat exporting and also agriculture, because Mongolia is the largest land per capita country in the world.
How do you invest in those spaces, though? It has to be on a direct basis, on a private basis. You can't do it through portfolio investment, correct? I mean, you have to negotiate these deals one at a time with individual participants.
Yeah, definitely. The capital markets development is at its early stage, but the investors could look into private equity opportunities, because there are lots of medium-sized companies who are quite willing to take greater risk and who are in need of capital. So I think, in my opinion, in next 2-3 years, Mongolian capital market will be fully integrated with the global one, becoming it feasible to exit the international investors by doing IPOs on the local exchange, or even coming to Hong Kong.
How much participation is there in the development of the financial infrastructure, outside participation in the local financial infrastructure?
Well, actually, we have quite a number of foreign-owned banks. We have some 2 or 3 Russian-owned banks, and we have some interest. We used to have some American-invested bank, and which they exited. And as you know, we have this Eurobond issued by Mongolian bank, and now lots of people are coming to country to invest in financial sector, which is also one of the interesting sector aside the prominent mining sector.
Brad, does Mongolia ever pop up on the radar screen for any of the people that you do consulting work for?
Certainly, I think for some of the emerging market hedge funds, they're going to focus and look at Mongolia for some of the natural resources that they have. I think, Bernie, as you think about some of the opportunities that are out there in emerging markets, we have to remember that Mongolia, 3-5 years from now, can easily be some of the Eastern Europe opportunities of 6-7 years ago. So we always need to take into consideration that people like Mark Mobius and some of the other people who focus on these markets as long-term investments will get on the ground and take a look at what are some of the resource capabilities, how people are going to think about the development in those markets longer term. And I think as they took a look at the Russian states, Kazakhstan is a good example, as our guest has talked about, and to think about what are the structures in those countries, those are good opportunities that people are going to be thinking about as we look into 2018, 2020, when the opportunities really come about.
Yeah. Does the mindset need to change? Let me read one short extract from Dr. Mobius. He said, an American company was mining coal on the Chinese border. They wanted to build a rail link to China to basically export and move the stuff faster, but the government insisted they use the Russian gauge of rail systems to connect to the Trans-Siberian Railway, but it doesn't mesh that well with the Chinese. There does need to be a certain compromise there, doesn't there? I mean, there does need to be some change in mindset in your country.
Well, actually, recently, one prominent Russian politician were quoted as saying, we need to take Mongolian example because Russia exported lots of raw materials without processing it into a finished product. So what Mongolia is trying to do, for us set in this example, is try to establish those large factories to process those lots of natural resources and to become the finished product. So that's why Mongolian government insists to follow the national grid lines.
Okay. Appreciate your time, okay? Thanks for sharing thoughts.